I remember sitting on the creaky wooden steps of my childhood home, staring out at the endless summer sky and wondering what it all meant. Back then, life was a series of simple moments, chasing fireflies, listening to my dad's old records, and dreaming about a future that seemed as vast as the horizon. Even then, I had an itch, a need to search for something more profound, a deeper meaning hidden in the mundane. Now, decades later, as I reflect on that long journey, I realize that my life, for all its ups and downs, has been a series of revelations. I married Linda over 30 years ago, and from the moment we exchanged vows, I believed we had created our own perfect universe. Together, we built a life that many would envy. We had 3 wonderful children: Jennifer, whose kindness and determination could light up any room; Adam, whose rebellious spirit was tempered only by his loyalty; and Laura, whose quiet strength was the anchor for us all. Each of them, in their own way, has taught me lessons about love, sacrifice, and the relentless quest for understanding. I still recall the day we celebrated our wedding anniversary like it was yesterday. We had gathered about 300 guests, people from every chapter of our lives, friends who had become family, relatives with stories as colorful as our own, and even a few influential figures from the city who somehow found their way into our circle. The air was buzzing with excitement and nostalgia. Laughter filled the expansive hall, mingling with the clink of glasses and soft murmurs of heartfelt conversations. It felt like a snapshot of perfection, a moment when every piece of my carefully constructed life fell seamlessly into place. But as I reminisce, I can't help but notice that behind every happy memory, there lurks the faint echo of unspoken questions. How did I truly get here? Was the life I so meticulously built really what I was meant to live? Amid the celebration and the joy, I found myself pondering the countless paths I might have taken, paths that led me away from this seemingly perfect existence. The search for meaning is a fickle companion. It whispers to you in moments of stillness, urging you to look beyond the surface and question the very nature of happiness. During that anniversary party, as I mingled with old friends and listened to their tales of struggle and triumph, I realized that perfection is nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. Our lives are layered with hidden depths, regrets, and dreams that never fully materialized. I wondered if everyone there was silently wrestling with their own sense of incompleteness, their own unresolved mysteries. That night, as the evening wore on and the revelry began to quiet down, I felt a profound sense of both gratitude and longing, a bittersweet acknowledgement that while I had been fortunate to experience so much love and joy, there remained a part of me forever chasing a truth just out of reach. Now, sitting here and writing this, I can't help but see that the perfect life I once believed in was, in many ways, just the beginning of my journey. Each smile, every tear, and every quiet moment of introspection has led me to this point, a crossroads where the past meets an uncertain future. My life with Linda and our children is a tapestry of love and memories. Yet it is also a reminder that even the most idyllic existence can hide layers of complexity beneath the surface. I have learned that true fulfillment comes not from having every piece of the puzzle perfectly in place, but from embracing the imperfections and the constant search for deeper meaning. I still remember the day everything started to unravel. The day a single conversation with Officer Dan shattered the fragile illusion of my perfectly ordered life. I had met him for what I assumed was just a routine check-in after a series of inexplicable events had left me unsettled. As we talked, his tone was unusually measured, almost cautious. "Thomas," he said, "there's something you need to know about Linda. On the day she was supposed to be home, we have evidence she was seen at the Grand Palace." The Grand Palace, a 5-star hotel known for its opulence and exclusivity, was a far cry from the mundane world I thought Linda inhabited. I was stunned. My mind raced with disbelief. Why would Linda, my Linda, be at such a place on that critical day? My heart pounded, a mix of confusion and dread coursing through my veins. Officer Dan's next words pierced through my fog of shock. We have reason to believe she wasn't alone. His eyes held a strange mix of sympathy and something else I couldn't quite read. She was with another man, he added, almost regretfully, though he made it clear that he couldn't officially reveal the man's name. The unspoken weight behind those words was enough to send chills down my spine. Without waiting for further explanation, I felt compelled to verify the truth for myself. I couldn't let the conversation end there. There was too much at stake. I rushed to the Grand Palace, my mind a jumble of anxious questions and reluctant hopes. I needed to see it with my own eyes to make sense of a reality that was rapidly crumbling. The hotel loomed before me, a grand edifice that seemed to mock the simplicity of my life with its intricate facade and glamorous allure. As I approached, a sudden, heart-stopping scream shattered the air. It was raw, agonizing, and utterly real. Instinctively, I broke into a run toward the sound, my legs moving faster than my trembling thoughts could catch up. When I reached the scene, I couldn't believe what I saw. There, in front of the hotel's entrance, was Linda, my Linda, being hurriedly carried out on a stretcher. Her face, bruised and contorted in pain, was a sight I never thought I'd have to witness. The ambulance lights flashed in a cruel rhythm, marking a surreal punctuation to the chaos unfolding before me. I learned, in that harrowing moment, that Linda had suffered serious injuries. Witnesses said she had attempted a desperate escape through a fourth-floor window, a detail that painted a picture of terror and urgency. Every instinct in me screamed that something was terribly wrong. The image of her, battered and vulnerable, clashed violently with the gentle, loving partner I thought I knew. I approached the scene, my emotions a volatile mix of anger, concern, and betrayal. Officer Dan was there again, standing amid the commotion, his expression as inscrutable as ever. I demanded answers, my voice raw with a desperation I barely recognized in myself. His response was as measured as our previous conversation. "I am sorry, Thomas. I can't say more than that officially, but I can confirm that Linda was indeed at the hotel, and yes, she was with someone else." His words, though delivered with professional detachment, felt like a punch to the gut. I could barely process the enormity of what I was hearing. Every moment of our shared history, every seemingly unbreakable bond, now tainted by the specter of betrayal. I stood there, frozen in a mixture of disbelief and sorrow, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the actions that had led her to that fateful night. The sight of her being carried away, the evidence of her desperate escape, and the implications of another man's involvement all swirled into a maelstrom of emotions that I wasn't prepared to face. In that moment, the perfect life I had built, the years of love, trust, and shared dreams, seemed to shatter like glass. As the ambulance doors closed and the crowd began to disperse, I couldn't shake the overwhelming sense that nothing would ever be the same. The truth, as painful and unyielding as it was, had been revealed in a flash of chaos and despair. Now, as I stand on the precipice of a future I never imagined, I'm left to grapple with questions that cut to the very core of who I am and what my life has become. After that night at the hotel, I felt nothing but numb disarray. I couldn't face the sterile confines of a hospital. Not for Linda, not for me. Instead, I drove away, seeking refuge in the one place where I might still find a semblance of stability, my father Henry's modest home. At 80, Henry had seen his share of heartbreak and loss, and I hoped his quiet wisdom might help me navigate the turmoil that now defined my life. When I arrived, the old house felt like a time capsule, walls steeped in memories of simpler days, filled with the echoes of my childhood laughter and my father's gentle reassurances. My 80-year-old father greeted me with a silent nod, his eyes reflecting a lifetime of unspoken stories. It was in that familiar, creaking home that I began to piece together the shattered remnants of my identity. I needed time, space, and a deep, introspective silence to understand what had happened, and perhaps to come to terms with it. Laura was there too, always the one who understood without words. She wrapped her arms around me, whispering that it was okay to feel lost. Her support was a small light in the overwhelming darkness, a sign that not all ties were severed. Yet, even as her presence offered comfort, the division within our family grew ever more apparent. Jennifer and Adam, my older children, stood on the opposite side of an invisible chasm, steadfast in their belief that I needed to forgive Linda, that forgiveness would mend the fractures in our family. Their insistence on absolution felt like a rebuke, a dismissal of the raw, unresolved pain I carried. In the midst of their pleas for reconciliation, I made a decision that would redefine our familial bonds. I left the family home. I chose to settle in with my father, where I could grieve and heal on my own terms. That decision, as necessary as it felt, came with a bitter cost. Almost immediately, I found myself drifting apart from Jennifer and Adam. Their unwavering support for their mother meant that any attempt on my part to seek solace in solitude, or with those who shared my immediate pain, was seen as a betrayal of the unity they craved. In the weeks that followed, phone calls dwindled and messages went unanswered. The once inseparable bond one shared with my two older children was now fractured, a casualty of conflicting loyalties and unspoken resentments. They had chosen to side with Linda, perhaps seeing forgiveness as a lifeline back to the family they knew, a family they believed could be mended if I only let go of the hurt. But for me, forgiveness was not a simple step to take. It was a mountain of pain I wasn't ready to climb. Now, as I sit in my father's quiet living room, the silence speaks louder than any argument ever could. I am caught between the echoes of what was and the uncertainty of what might be. The split in my family is not just a physical distance. It's a deep emotional chasm, filled with love turned sour, trust shattered beyond repair, and an aching longing for the unity that once defined us. Here, with my father's slow, measured wisdom as my only guide, I must confront the raw truth of my own heart and decide whether the path to healing lies in forgiving the past or forging a new future alone. It had been 5 long months since that fateful night when everything started to crumble. I was still holed up in my father's creaking old house, the silence a constant reminder of the love and family I'd lost. The weight of the past months, of betrayal, anger, and regret, had settled into my bones like a stubborn winter chill. Then one cold afternoon, as I sat staring at nothing in particular, Adam arrived. His face was etched with worry, and the lines on his face seemed deeper than ever. He told me, hesitantly, that Linda had been spiraling down into a depression. According to him, she was barely eating, her body slowly wasting away, as if the very life had been sucked out of her. Every word he spoke hammered home a grim truth I had been too afraid to face. Even now, I was not ready to step back into that tangled web of memories and emotions. My return to the family and to the chaos that Linda represented was unthinkable. I still clung to the fragile remnants of solitude I'd built in my father's quiet home. Yet, despite my resistance to reconnect with the world I once knew, time marched on relentlessly. Half a year after that chaotic night at the hotel, a call came that would shatter any pretense of stability I had left. Linda, my Linda, had taken her own life. The news hit like a tidal wave. She had ingested a large dose of sleeping pills, ending her life in a tragic, final act that left nothing but shattered hopes and broken dreams in its wake. I found myself at her funeral, standing among a sea of grief-stricken faces. The air was thick with sorrow and whispered accusations, each one a dagger aimed directly at my heart. In hushed tones and even louder condemnations, people openly blamed me for her death. They said I had abandoned her when she needed me most, that my refusal to forgive and let go had driven her deeper into despair until she saw no other escape. Every word, every stare felt like an indictment of all I had once believed about love and loyalty. In that moment, something within me broke entirely. The years of pent-up anger, sorrow, and the betrayal I had felt crystallized into a final, irreversible decision. As the mourners wept around me, I made a vow, a cold, hard resolution. I would sever every remaining tie with Jennifer and Adam. the two who had sided with Linda when I was still drowning in my own grief. To me, they had become as dead as the woman they had chosen over the truth of what had happened. The pain of Linda's death was a wound that cut too deeply, and in that agony, I could no longer bear the thought of their voices, their reminders of a past that now seemed nothing more than a series of betrayals. I left the funeral with a numb detachment, my mind echoing with the finality of my decision. The connection I had once shared with my older children was gone, irretrievably severed. They were not just estranged, they were, in my eyes, as lifeless as the memory of Linda herself. In that cold moment, I allowed myself to believe that perhaps, in cutting them off, I was sparing myself from further anguish. I retreated into a solitude that was more absolute than anything I'd ever known, the silence around me now both a refuge and a prison. I often wonder if I made the right choice. The decision to leave behind not just a wife, but also a part of my own soul, lingers like a specter in the quiet hours of the night. Yet, as I look back at that day, at the harsh words and the accusatory glares, I know that for me, forgiveness was no longer an option. The betrayal was too raw, the loss too deep. I had been blamed for the final act of a life that had once meant everything, and in my grief, I chose to let go of anyone who had ever stood by her side. Now, as I write these words, I feel the emptiness of my decisions, a life dismantled piece by piece until nothing familiar remains. The toll of those fatal consequences is a constant companion, a reminder of a time when every choice carried the weight of irreversible loss. After the funeral and the severing of every tie I once held dear, I realized that the only way to survive the relentless pain was to completely cut off the past. I distanced myself from nearly everyone I had known, friends, acquaintances, even colleagues who might have offered some semblance of comfort. I retreated into my own world, one where every memory was meticulously locked away, leaving behind a barren landscape of solitude that I had once believed was my only refuge. In that isolation, I discovered an unexpected outlet: writing. I began to pour my raw, unfiltered emotions onto paper, crafting a narrative of my journey from shattered trust and loss to this uneasy new existence. The book wasn't just an attempt to make sense of what had happened. It became my lifeline, a way to externalize the haunting ghosts of my past. Every sentence was a small rebellion against the despair that had threatened to engulf me, a testament to my desire to rebuild from the ruins of my former life. As I immersed myself in the process, I enrolled in a local writing course. It was there, in a small, sunlit classroom filled with other souls seeking solace in words, that I met Selena. She was unlike anyone I'd encountered in my years of self-imposed exile. Her story was remarkably similar to mine, a narrative of loss, betrayal, and the slow, painful journey toward healing. Over time, our shared experiences fostered a deep, unspoken understanding between us. In her, I found a kindred spirit who knew what it meant to rebuild when every part of you was left in tatters. Selena was not just a confidant. She became the unexpected bridge that reconnected me, albeit tenuously, with a world beyond my self-imposed isolation. One afternoon, after one of our long discussions about the cathartic nature of writing, she asked to read what I had been working on. I hesitated at first, unsure if my painful truths were ready for the eyes of another human being. But something in her steady, compassionate gaze pushed me to share the raw manuscript that had been my companion through endless sleepless nights. I remember the day she returned my manuscript, her face lit with a mixture of astonishment and encouragement. "Thomas," she said, "this is powerful. I think you need to share this with more people." She confided that her son, who had been following his own dreams in New York, worked at one of the largest publishing houses there. Without a second thought, she took my manuscript in her hands, determined to let her son see the work that had so vividly captured the pain and the hope of my journey. That small act of reading, believing, and then championing my work ignited a spark I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I began to entertain the possibility that my words could reach beyond the confines of my lonely world. The idea that my experiences, my anguish, and the gradual healing process could resonate with others was both terrifying and exhilarating. Perhaps, through my story, I could help someone else navigate their own darkness. In that moment, I decided to embrace this new path fully, stepping out of the shadows and into a future where my past was no longer a chain, but a chapter that had led me to a new beginning. Looking back now, I see that unexpected success was born from the willingness to confront my deepest scars and transform them into something meaningful. My life, once defined by betrayal and isolation, had begun to pivot toward a form of redemption, a chance to reclaim my voice, my story, and perhaps my place in a world that I had thought had abandoned me long ago. My book's success was a surreal twist in the story of my life. Overnight, I went from a solitary man locked in his father's old home to a national bestseller, embarking on a 2-month tour that took me to cities I'd only known through faded photographs and wistful memories. Standing on stage, I recited the raw, unfiltered truth of my journey, each word a step toward healing and a plea for understanding. The response was overwhelming. Former friends, those who had once condemned my choices and left me to wallow in despair, now approached me with hesitant apologies. Their words, filled with remorse and newfound insight, made me wonder if maybe forgiveness wasn't just for the lost, but for the living as well. One evening, during an intimate book reading at a small theater, I encountered a woman who carried an air of mystery and sorrow. She introduced herself as the ex-wife of Linda's lover, a connection I never expected to encounter. In a hushed, almost conspiratorial tone, she revealed that after the tumultuous events that had shattered our family, she had fled to Australia, seeking a fresh start far away from the chaos that had defined our past. Her confession stirred something within me. While my heart still bore scars from betrayal, there was a strange comfort in learning that others, too, had found the courage to leave behind a life marred by deceit. Not long after that encounter, during one of my tour performances in a bustling city, I scanned the crowd and saw a familiar face. There, near the back, was Jennifer, my eldest daughter, whose silence had echoed through the years since our family's bitter split. For a fleeting moment, hope flared in me, as if the past might finally be mended. But as the performance ended, she remained at a distance, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and unresolved hurt. She never came up to me afterward, and the missed opportunity left an ache that words couldn't quite capture. 7 long years had passed since the betrayal that tore our family apart, a span of time filled with solitude, hard truths, and the slow, painful art of rebuilding. And then, as if the universe had decided it was finally time to mend the fractured pieces of our bond, Jennifer found the courage to step forward. One quiet afternoon, as the autumn sun cast gentle shadows on the worn wooden floor of my modest study, she knocked on my door. With tears in her eyes and hesitation in her voice, she apologized. Every syllable was heavy with years of regret and the longing to bridge the chasm that had separated us for so long. In that raw, emotional moment, I realized that despite all the betrayals, the bitterness, and the fatal consequences that had redefined our lives, there was still a chance, however fragile, to reclaim a sense of family. As I listened to her, I felt the weight of past decisions ease just enough to let in a glimmer of hope. My journey had taken me through darkness and despair, but now, standing on the threshold of reconciliation, I wondered if love could indeed be the unexpected, healing path forward. 7 years after that fateful day when my daughter Jennifer found the courage to stand at my doorstep, the days of turmoil and bitter regrets have slowly begun to melt into something resembling peace. Jennifer and I spent hours talking, slowly bridging the chasm that had grown between us. Her heartfelt apologies and my own hesitant forgiveness laid the foundation for a tentative new beginning. Although our reconciliation brought with it a sense of relief and warmth, one truth remained painfully clear. Adam, my once beloved son, continued to avoid me. His absence was a constant reminder that some wounds never truly mend, no matter how many apologies are exchanged. In the midst of this fragile family healing, I discovered something else, an unexpected love that had been quietly blooming in the background of my reclusive life. Selena, the woman who had once understood my soul through the shared language of heartbreak and healing, had become an inseparable part of my daily existence. It wasn't long before I knew that what we had was more than just friendship or mutual support. It was something deeper, something worth committing to. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the California hills and bathed our modest living room in a soft, forgiving light, I got down on one knee and proposed to her. Her tearful, joyful yes felt like a promise of new beginnings. A promise that the future, however uncertain, could be crafted by our own hands. Laura and Jennifer embraced my decision with open hearts. Their support was a balm to the lingering scars of the past, and it made me feel that, despite everything, our family could find a way to live with love and acceptance. With their blessing, I packed up the remnants of my old life and moved to California, a place known for its endless horizons and the possibility of reinvention. In this sun-drenched land, I began to rebuild not just a home, but a life filled with hope and purpose. Every morning, as I walked along the sandy beaches and watched the waves tirelessly reshape the shore, I reflected on the twists and turns that had brought me to this point. I would never completely forget Linda's betrayal, the image of her desperate flight, the painful farewell at her funeral, and the accusations that had once felt like a death sentence to my soul. Yet over time, I learned that forgiveness is not about erasing the past, but about accepting it as a part of the mosaic that makes you who you are. In that acceptance, I finally found a peace of mind that had eluded me for so long. Selena and I built our new life together with a slow, steady rhythm that felt both comforting and invigorating. We spent 2 decades exploring every corner of our shared world, celebrating small victories and finding joy in the everyday. Our home became a sanctuary of creativity and laughter, and every room echoed with stories of resilience and second chances. I even began to outline a new book, one that would tell the tale of a man who, against all odds, found love again after the darkest of betrayals. I titled it, in my mind, A Second Chance at Love, a testament to the unexpected turns that life can take when you dare to open your heart once more. Looking back on my journey, I see it as a tapestry woven with threads of pain, redemption, and ultimately hope. While Linda's betrayal will forever be a part of my past, it no longer defines the entirety of my existence. Instead, it serves as a poignant reminder of how far I've come, from a man drowning in bitterness to one who now cherishes every new sunrise, every shared smile, and every moment of genuine connection. In the quiet evenings, as Selena and I sit together watching the stars emerge over the Pacific, I often think of the lost years and the family ties that remain irreparably broken. Adam's absence still stings, a silent echo of what might have been. But as I hold Selena's hand and feel the warmth of our life in California, I know that sometimes the greatest triumph is not the absence of pain, but the courage to keep moving forward despite it. And in that movement, I have finally found my way to a place of true happiness, a place where love, hope, and the possibility of redemption shine brighter than any past shadow.